Let's jump right in. I fired the oldest janitor in my company, right in front of more than 200 employees. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply smiled, took off his employee badge, and quietly walked toward the exit. Then something happened. That changed my life forever. My 6-year-old daughter broke free from her mother's hand, ran across the lobby, wrapped her arms around the old janitor, and cried, "Grandpa, don't leave again." Every person in the building froze, including me. My name is Ethan Carter. At 39, I owned Carter Developments, one of the fastest growing real estate companies in Texas. People admired my success. The magazines called me a genius. Investors called me fearless. Employees called me sir. But there was one thing nobody knew. I trusted numbers, not people, because people always disappointed you. That's exactly why I hated excuses. And Henry, the old janitor, always seemed to have one. Every morning, instead of simply cleaning the building, he was helping someone, a receptionist carrying heavy boxes, an intern fixing a flat tire, a security guard whose wife was in the hospital. Everyone loved Henry. Honestly, I didn't understand why. He was just a janitor. One Monday morning, I arrived early for an important meeting with investors. The marble floor in the lobby still had muddy footprints. Coffee cups were sitting on the reception desk. Nothing looked ready. Then I spotted Henry. Instead of cleaning, he was kneeling beside a young employee. The kid looked terrified. Henry was quietly helping him tie his necktie. "It's your first day?" Henry smiled. "You only get one first impression." The young man laughed nervously. "Thank you." I looked around the lobby. Investors would arrive in less than 10 minutes. The place looked terrible. My patience disappeared. "Henry." The entire lobby turned toward me. Henry stood immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." I pointed toward the dirty floor. "Is this what I pay you for?" He looked down. "I'm sorry, sir. I was only helping." I cut him off. "Helping doesn't clean floors." His smile faded. "I'll finish right away." "No." I took one step closer. "You've had enough chances." The lobby became silent. Employees slowly stopped working. Everyone was watching. I looked Henry directly in the eyes. "You're fired." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Henry quietly removed his employee badge, placed it on the reception desk, then looked at me with the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "I hope one day you'll understand." Without another word, he turned toward the exit. I thought it was over, until I heard the elevator doors open. "Daddy!" My little daughter, Sophie, ran into the lobby. Before I could stop her, she sprinted past me, straight toward Henry. She hugged him as tightly as she could, looked up at me, and through tears whispered, "Daddy, why did you fire Grandpa?" For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. I looked at Sophie, then at Henry, then back at my wife, Claire. The color had completely drained from her face. "Sophie," I forced a smile. "Honey, come back to Daddy." She shook her head. "No." She hugged Henry even tighter. "Grandpa didn't do anything wrong." Every employee in the lobby was staring at me. I could feel hundreds of eyes watching. My investors had just walked through the front doors. Perfect timing. I lowered my voice. "Sophie, who told you this man is your grandpa?" She looked confused. "Nobody told me." "He is Grandpa." I turned toward Claire. "Explain this." She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly walked toward Henry. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Henry smiled gently. "It's all right. I knew this day would come." Those words made my stomach tighten. "Knew." I looked between them. "How long have you two known each other?" Claire closed her eyes for a second. 7 years. 7 years. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. 7 years. We've only been married 8. She nodded. "Yes." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. "You've been hiding another man from me?" Henry immediately stepped forward. "No, don't blame her. I asked her not to tell you." I stared at him. You asked my wife to keep secrets from me?" He nodded calmly. "Yes." I laughed bitterly. This just keeps getting better. I turned toward security. Escort him out. Before either guard could move, Sophie suddenly stepped in front of Henry. "No!" She stretched out both little arms, trying to protect the old man. "If Grandpa leaves, I'm leaving too." The guards froze. Nobody knew what to do. Claire knelt beside Sophie. "Sweetheart, Please. Sophie was crying now. You promised Daddy would understand. Understand? I slowly looked back at Claire. What exactly am I supposed to understand? Claire wiped away a tear. Ethan, I never wanted you to find out like this. My voice became colder. Find out what? She looked at Henry, then back at me. Finally, she whispered the sentence. That made my entire world stop. Henry knew your father. Better than anyone. I frowned. My father. I buried my father 22 years ago. Henry slowly reached into the inside pocket of his old work jacket. Then, without saying a single word, he placed a small silver pocket watch into my hand. The moment I saw it, my heart stopped, because engraved on the back were two words, written in my father's handwriting. For Ethan. I couldn't take my eyes off the pocket watch. My hand started shaking. I had seen it only once before. On my 10th birthday, my father had smiled, held it in his hand, and said, "One day, Ethan, this will be yours." But after he died, the watch disappeared. I looked at Henry. Where did you get this? He answered quietly. Your father gave it to me. I shook my head. No, that's impossible. I buried him. Henry sighed. Yes, you buried him. But you never heard the whole story. The lobby was completely silent. Even my investors had stopped talking. Nobody wanted to leave. I looked at Claire. You knew about this? She nodded. I found Henry 5 years ago. My heart skipped a beat. You found him? She wiped away a tear. I was trying to learn more about your father. Because every time his name came up, you changed the subject. I wanted Sophie to know where her family came from. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Henry slowly spoke again. Your father wasn't the man you thought he was. I laughed bitterly. He walked away from us. He chose work over family. He wasn't there when Mom got sick. Henry's eyes filled with tears. No, Ethan. He never walked away. You push him away. Those words hit me like a truck. What did you just say? Henry stepped closer. The night you left home, your father begged you to stay. I remember that night. I was 19. We argued for hours. I told him, I never want to see you again. Then I slammed the door. I never went back. Henry continued. The next morning, he drove to your apartment. He wanted to apologize. My breathing became heavier. But he never made it. I frowned. What do you mean? Henry looked down at the floor. There was a truck. It crossed the center line. Your father survived, but he was never the same again. The entire lobby fell silent. I stared at him. He survived? Henry nodded. For almost 3 years. 3 years. 3 years? I felt my knees weaken. I thought he died that night. Henry slowly shook his head. No. He spent 3 years in rehabilitation. He couldn't walk. He could barely speak. Every word felt like a knife. He asked about you every single day. He wanted to see you. I whispered. Why didn't anyone tell me? Henry closed his eyes. Because he made us promise. He said, if Ethan is happy without me, don't force him to come back. He deserves a better life than the one I gave him. I covered my mouth. I couldn't breathe. For 20 years, I had blamed my father for abandoning me. But the truth was, he had spent the last years of his life waiting for me. Henry reached in his bag one last time. There's one more thing. He carefully placed an old video cassette on the table. I've kept this for 20 years. It's the last message your father ever recorded. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. I promised him I would only give it to you when your own daughter was old enough to teach you what unconditional love really means. I took the old videotape with trembling hands. I hadn't seen a VHS cassette in years. Henry smiled softly. I had it converted. He reached into his bag again and handed me a small flash drive. I figured you wouldn't own a VCR anymore. Nobody in the lobby said a word. I looked at Claire. Let's go upstairs. For the first time in my career, I canceled the biggest investor meeting of the year. Nothing mattered anymore. 5 minutes later, the four of us sat inside my office. Henry, Claire, little Sophie, and me. I plugged the flash drive into my computer. The screen stayed black for a few seconds. Then, my father's face appeared. He looked much older than I remembered. His hair was almost completely gray. His voice was weak, but I'd recognize it anywhere. Hello, son. The moment I heard those words, my eyes filled with tears. If you're watching this, Henry finally broke his promise. He smiled, which probably means, You've finally become the man I always hoped you'd be. He coughed for a moment, then continued. I don't have much time, so I'll only ask you for one thing. Don't spend your life hating me. I've already forgiven you. My breathing became heavier. I know you think I abandoned you, but the truth is, I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to build your future without carrying the weight of my mistakes. He looked away from the camera for a second, then smiled again. You know, you were only 8 years old. When you first met Henry, you called him Uncle Hank. I slowly looked at Henry. He nodded. I used to come over every Sunday. I couldn't remember. Not at first. Then suddenly, a memory flashed through my mind. Fishing, ice cream, a baseball game, a tall man laughing beside my father. Henry. He'd been there all along. Dad continued speaking. After my accident, I asked Henry to do something crazy. I told him, stay close to Ethan. If he ever needs someone, be there. Don't tell him I asked. Just watch over him. I turned toward Henry. You worked in my company. Because of my father? Henry smiled. I applied the same week your company opened. I started as a maintenance worker. Eventually, I became the old janitor everyone ignored. I stared at him. You could have told me. Henry slowly shook his head. I promised your father. And some promises last a lifetime. The video wasn't finished. My father leaned closer to the camera. If Ethan ever has a child, please let that little one know that her grandfather loved her before she was even born. Sophie looked at the screen, then quietly whispered, he was talking about me. Claire nodded. Yes, sweetheart. He was. Dad smiled one last time. And Henry, if you're watching this too, thank you for giving my son the family he didn't know he still had. The screen faded to black. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Sophie quietly climbed off her chair, walked over to Henry, and hugged him again. This time, I didn't stop her. Instead, I walked over myself, looked the old janitor in the eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, I said the two words I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry. The words barely left my mouth. I'm sorry. Henry looked at me for a long moment. Then, he smiled. You don't owe me an apology, Ethan. I shook my head. Yes, I do. I judged you. I humiliated you. I fired the one man who spent 20 years protecting my family. My voice broke, and I never even asked who you really were. Henry gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Your father always told me, don't be angry with Ethan. One day, he'll understand. I looked down. He was right. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around Henry. For the first time since I was a little boy, I cried in another man's embrace. When I stepped back, I turned toward the office door. Come with me. Henry looked confused. Where? The lobby. A few minutes later, the entire company had gathered again. Every employee, every investor, every manager, they all expected another announcement. I walked to the microphone. A deep silence filled the room. This morning, I made the biggest mistake of my career. I looked at Henry. I fired the best employee I've ever had. People exchanged surprised glances. I continued. I believed leadership was about power. I was wrong. It's about character. And today, the person with the strongest character in this building isn't the CEO. It's Henry. I turned toward him. I'm asking you not to come back as our janitor. The room became completely silent. Instead, I'm asking you to become director of employee care. Your only job will be to do exactly what you've always done. Take care of people. For the first time that day, the entire building erupted into applause. Some employees were wiping away tears. Others stood to their feet. Henry smiled. I don't know anything about offices. I laughed through my tears. You know everything about people, and that's far more important. Sophie ran onto the stage. She grabbed Henry's hand. Then she grabbed mine. We're family now. The audience smiled. Henry looked at me. Only if your father would be proud. I smiled. He already is. 6 months later, our company had changed completely. Employee turnover dropped. People actually looked forward to coming to work. Henry somehow knew everyone's birthday, every child's name, every struggle they were facing. He reminded us every day that kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. One afternoon, Sophie was drawing in my office. She handed me a picture. It showed 3 people. Me, her, and Henry, above us. She had written 4 simple words. The grandpa I chose. I smiled and hung the drawing on my office wall, right beside my father's old pocket watch, because I finally understood something. Family isn't always the people you're born with. Sometimes, it's the people who quietly love you, even when you don't deserve it. And sometimes, the greatest man in the building isn't the one sitting in the corner office. It's the old janitor everyone forgot to notice.